We'd be going in short-handed, you know?
Look, he's still got the stones, so...
So let's get them. Use them to bring everyone back.
Just like that.
Yeah, just like that.
Even if there's a small chance that we can undo this, I mean, we owe it to everyone who's not in this room to try.
If we do this, how do we know it's gonna end any differently than it did before?
Because before you didn't have me.
Hey, new girl, everybody in this room is about that superhero life. And if you don't mind my asking, where the hell have you been all this time?
There are a lot of other planets in the universe. And unfortunately, they didn't have you guys.
And welcome back to A Stark Contrast, where we discuss the differences and similarities from Marvel Comics to their MCU counterparts. And we are your hosts, Geoffrey
and Dai.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Welcome back.
Welcome back.
Yes, on this rainy day.
Rainy day in California.
Southern California, yes.
And it's about, the storm is coming, Mr. Wayne.
Yes.
If it hasn't arrived already.
100%.
So yeah, we're coming off of our big 50th episode. We had a gigantic rapid fire 57 questions strong. Thanks again, Desmati, for those. So if you haven't yet listened to that episode, backtrack a bit, have a little fun listening to a bunch of lots of topics from the MCU. And speaking of MCU goodness, have you seen all of these notes that I have here as far as the latest news that have come about, my friend?
Some of them, not all of them.
Not all of them, really. Yeah. So huge news. First and foremost, a long-standing pillar in the MCU as we know it, Victoria Alonso has officially left the studio. Like when that popped up on my feed, I was like, what?
Yeah.
Like that's tremendous.
Huge. That is very huge news.
She was part of the game as far back as before Iron Man. So what that means,
I don't know. I mean, she was head of physical VFX and everything.
Yeah.
So,
and then didn't she graduate to another role?
Something like that. And I also read a story about like after she had left, some VFX artists like came forward, you know, and kind of been like, were like they were afraid of her. Like if you like,
really?
Yeah.
No way.
Like if you did good, she'll send you the work. But if you got on her bad side, she'd pretty much blacklist you. But that's just all allegedly.
Allegedly. That's the key word.
But
interesting.
I don't know. So it'll be definitely interesting.
Yeah.
And who either comes in and replaces her or where they go.
Yeah.
Whatever she was overseeing.
Yeah. Because I have no concept. I have no concept of like what all films she was a part of. Was she just a part of all of them? And like where does her tenure end too?
I read that it was like her and Kevin that kind of gave final approval on VFX shots.
Wow.
Which is kind of a heavy task, and that really should be left to strictly the head creatives on that project.
I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second. Do you think this has anything to do with Quantumania?
I think it has to do with just the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Of like how the VFX has gotten criticized and how, you know, it's timelines are too short for VFX, but Marvel expects them to be done in this certain time, but that's too short of a time to do because VFX takes a long time. It is a very, very, very heavy and long process in the post-production stage. So shout outs to VFX artists because it is tough. I think it was just an accumulation of all that negative criticism. And then it was just kind of like, she was like, I'm just going to step down.
Wow.
Because if you don't like how I run things, then I'm just going to leave type of thing.
I
don't know. That's just me.
So we'll see. I mean, because that's going to be interesting. And again, I don't know where her last work ends. So whether or not that's the rest of the phase or whatever's left,
when is her credits going to stop?
Yeah, when do the credits officially end? That'll be very interesting. But I guess we'll find out sooner than later. In lighter news, congrats to Ruth Carter. She is a woman of many talents, especially when it comes to costuming our favorite heroes. And she won an Academy Award for Best Costume Design at the Oscars not too long ago. for Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. And I didn't realize that this was the 4th win for the MCU at the Academy Awards.
Oh, wow.
But they're all from Black Panther.
Love it.
Which is if she had just won, if Our Lady, our big Queen Ramonda had just won, that lead actress one, that would have been incredible. I get why she didn't. I totally do. It's Angela Bassett. I get it.
Was it lead or was it supporting?
Oh, sorry.
It was
supporting. Yeah. If she had just gone, oh, man.
I think she deserved it.
I think she deserved it, too.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever. It is what it is. But big wins all around.
Yes.
It's all good. Another win. Officially, Captain America: New World Order has begun filming. As of, I don't know if it's today or if it was yesterday.
This week, yeah.
Yeah, but they've officially started filming. There's photos of Anthony Mackie.
You're all
around.
up in the leaking news now,
Dude,
huh, Dai?
it's that Twitter feed. It's that Twitter feed because I saw the picture a couple of times and I was like,
yeah, same.
And I thought it was from Falcon and the Winter Soldier because that show has officially, it's celebrating its 1st anniversary.
Yes.
And so I was like, oh, it's a throwback. And then I actually read what the caption says and I was like, that's a new picture. And so it's Sam and he's standing what appears to be the dock in Louisiana. I hate that I've seen it, but it's not too bad.
You know what else I can also add to that?
What?
New Daredevil photos of
Yes,
on
it's
set.
true. I mean, I had to get up on that one
Of
because
young Maddie Murdock.
Maddie Murdock
on the streets of New York.
Yes,
So,
with his crimson glasses.
yes.
Probably the most comic accurate to date, I think.
Yes.
Very, very excited.
So yeah, it's all unavoidable at this point.
I know.
Dai's in it. She's in she's in the set photo leak train.
And speaking of, like James Gunn straight up said was like, oh yeah, avoid the social media.
Because it's gonna open in China first.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so I'm like, well, guess I'm not gonna be on my social media.
I'm always just like, whenever I log on Twitter, it's always just like, well, Jesus is gonna take the wheel on this finger. He's
exactly.
just gonna.
I can't.
And then I have to like pause, and I'm like, do I want to see this? Then I'll keep scrolling.
Yeah.
But there's times I'll be like, ooh, and I'll click the link, and I'm like, well, I seen it.
Yeah, man, dude. Like I was talking to a friend about this because we're big Guardians fans.
Yeah.
And I just said to him, I was like, and his name is Peter. I was like, Peter, I still have PTSD from Guardians Volume 2. And we both did because we were very good about not looking at spoilers.
Yes.
It's cool. It's fine. It'll be out in 24 hours. And so Europe had gotten it a day before.
Of course.
And we got spoiled because somebody put in their like username field. They put, he squashed my Walkman or something. And I was like, oh my God, his Walkman breaks. Oh my God. And
That
then,
was your spoiler?
yeah. And then I watched the movie and I was like, oh my God, his Walkman does break. And it's because that stupid person.
Changes.
He broke my Walkman. Squished my Walkman.
Wow.
I was like, are you kidding me?
That's
Of all
hilarious.
things. So I'm sure I'm not safe. I'm going to take all the precautions and see what I can do. But I'm hoping I won't get super spoiled on that one. Unless, we see the movie early.
If anyone wants to.
So we'll see. And I guess, that's the rest of the news. But as the last few episodes have prevailed, stay tuned for this episode's giveaway, which includes a couple of our new decal stickers that generally Patreon members are only getting. So not only will you get that, but you'll get this adorable chibi Hulkbuster pin from Avengers Campus, as well as I had to go digging. I had to go digging in my stuff because I was like, I know I have something Captain Marvel. I don't have that much, and I didn't have anything that I was getting rid of. There was no Captain Marvel.
Yeah.
But I was like, I remember I got this promo, a very cool promo. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen it anywhere. And so I met this girl at San Diego Comic-Con a couple of years ago, maybe 4. And she was a flight attendant for Singapore Airlines.
Okay.
And she gave me one of these promos that they had. She was like, oh, we had these for the movie. Here, you can have one too. And I was
wow.
like, oh, cool. And so I don't know, it's like a pocket zipper thing, but it's really cool, very rare. Yeah, and I hope it goes to a really big Captain Marvel fan because I'm more than willing to part with it. So if you'd like to win that, And we'll post pictures of it on social. Please stay tuned and listen for the key phrase later in the episode.
Woo!
And that said, a reminder that we're not experts and we don't claim to be. We're just a couple of nerds nerding out. That all said, welcome to our character study on the one and only Carol Danvers.
Higher, further, faster, baby.
What if that was the keyword? I'd be like, well, DM us with That'd be funny. Yeah, Captain Marvel, baby. So we'll dive right in. Created by Roy Thomas and Gene Colan. Those names have floated around in a few episodes. So they might sound familiar to some folks. So for her first appearance, this one is probably one of the more complicated ones because it's a multi-level first appearance. Like she's got a tier, like several tiers of first appearances.
Oh.
And so Carol has a first appearance. Captain Marvel has a first appearance. And so Carol has gone through the books, and we've discussed this very briefly in our Kamala Khan episode. Carol was the original Ms. Marvel.
That's right.
So Ms. Marvel precedes Captain Marvel, but she's not. She's just Carol Danvers at first. So it's a lot of that.
All right, guys.
Prepared.
New thing to get. How many times will we say the word Marvel
New drinking
in
game.
this? Every time we say Marvel, you have to do a half a shot of something nearby you.
Or do a push-up.
Whatever you choose.
There you go.
You can choose to be fit or you can choose to be drunk. Whatever you want.
Exactly. So to kick that off, we're going to talk about the below based on Carol Danvers' first appearance in Marvel Superheroes number 13, which features Captain Marvel, but not the Captain Marvel we know. And this was dated March 1968. And so do you want to give a guess of the cover price cost of a comic from 1968?
60 cents.
Close. No
Damn.
cigar. 25 cents.
Ah!
So here's the cover. That is the Captain Marvel that we're not going to talk too much about, but it's a familiar Captain Marvel who is named Marvel. It gets a little complicated. Yeah. So the comic started at 25 cents, but at its highest on short box, a CGC graded 8.0, which is pretty darn good for 1968, goes for about $750.
Pain.
And on eBay, this is kind of wild because again, 8.0 jumping to a 9.4, which is a full grade tier.
Yeah.
It's half a grade. It's half a point away from being like mint. Goes for about $5,342.01.
Good Lord.
But again, this is eBay sellers versus short box collectors.
Sure.
It's a little sketch, but yeah, so there are two varying prices as far as that's concerned. The lowest on short box is a CGC 3.0. Kind of terrible shape for a cool $291. And if you want to go even lower, a 2.0.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's got to be missing a page or something. Like it's pretty bad.
It's had to gone through the ringer.
Yeah,
something.
for sure. 2.0 for $99. So if you just want it to have it,
Hey, $99 from 25 cents. That's a jump.
That's a jump. That's a jump for sure. So yeah, you can get you one of those. Or if you just want to get a loosey-goosey, if you find a dealer that has the book and it's pretty fair condition, you can get it for about $80. So do as you will. I don't have any trading cards for this particular character. I was rummaging through my folders before we started recording, but more importantly, what was your first exposure to the character?
When Brie got announced at Comic-Con. For
that was
sure.
First. You were like,
yeah,
no idea.
Because I'm a huge Brie Larson fan. You know, from all her roles you didn't know that she was playing and stuff.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but was she in 13 going on 30 with Jennifer Garner? But she was one of the kids.
Yes,
she was, right?
I think so.
I think she was too.
I'm gonna have to fact check, but I think I remember watching an interview of saying like, oh, she was there. Yeah.
Is she a Disney kid?
No,
No?
I don't believe so.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, like, her from Scott Pilgrim versus the World and stuff. She's in that.
That's right. She's the drummer.
Yeah, and she sings. She has the song and everything.
Yeah.
So I know her
loved
from
her
like
in
all
the-
those
Yeah.
like smaller roles. I've always been a fan, and so when I saw it watching Comic-Con, I think, right?
Yep.
And she got announced as Captain Marvel.
Yep.
You're like, ooh, okay.
Yeah, man.
I'm excited.
That's when we got that sick hat. I think it was the Marvel Studios hat.
Yeah, I think that was like 2016 Comic-Con, maybe.
Maybe. Yeah.
Maybe possibly. It could be
Sounds right.
2016 or 2017. That was
Yeah.
when everybody was there. Like
Yeah.
that was a good year. It was a good Comic-Con Marvel Hall H year.
That could have been the year that I snuck into Hall H.
Possibly.
I made it was worth it, especially for that outcome. For me, definitely X-Men roots. We're probably going to talk about that. But yeah, I was definitely an X-Men kid growing up. And so,
Yeah.
like for those of you who haven't been part of our discussions in earlier episodes, it was always kind of like, okay, well, if I have to pick a side and it's going to be X-Men or Captain Marvel or Ms. Marvel, for that matter, versus Rogue, who's going to be? And I'm like, Rogue. And so she'd always been kind of like, not a bad guy, but I wasn't rooting for her. And that started as far back as the 90s, easily. Because she was in a major episode in the X-Men animated series where they do talk about Rogue's origin story, and she's a big part of that episode. She's like at least in, I would say, 30-40% of it. So that's more or less how I got to know the character.
Got it.
Yeah, and so I was able to pull up one of my digital cards on Carol. So the one-on-one on Captain Marvel, I'll give you her stats here, which are pretty funny. Her height, 5'11", weight, 165, place of origin, Boston, Massachusetts. She's a masshole. Powers, energy blast, flight in space, binary powers, superhuman strength. And then the blurb says, after an alien device mutated her DNA, Danvers transformed from a merely brilliant pilot into one of the most powerful superheroes in the universe. Now soaring among the stars, Carol Danvers is known as Captain Marvel. So that's a relatively modern take on her.
Yeah.
You're going to hear some bizarre stuff coming up. I can't wait for your reactions just because it's so strange. But with that, we'll get into Carol Susan Jane Danvers. So like I mentioned, she starts out, her first appearance starts out as merely Carol Danvers. She's a beautiful blonde and she's in a pencil skirt and she's on site at Cape Kennedy, of all places. And so when we first meet her, she's security chief, as they say it. She's basically chief of security is the proper way to say it, I guess.
Yeah.
Where sometimes they even regard her as a consultant. And so she's telling people what to do and she's part of this, missile base. And a giant robot, which was the robot on the cover of the issue, the Sentry, came down from space. They're not sure why. They're not sure what the heck it is. But a keen reminder that, hey, this is the other Captain Marvel we're talking about. So this giant robot thing came to Earth on a mission to destroy Marvel.
Yes.
And so it was it was more or less in stasis and it wasn't activated. And so Carol was like, I'm trying to figure out, I don't understand what this is. So this huge story with Marvel, and he's posing as a doctor name with a last name Lawson. Yeah, I know you're putting it together already. You see where this is going. So for those who aren't quick on the uptake, Marvel is Dr. Lawson, who is Annette Bening's character in Captain Marvel. So they've flipped the switch. They've gender swapped the character.
Got it. Okay.
And so that this character in the comics also becomes, similarly to the film, like Carol's friend and confidant and someone she looks up to. So the issue goes about as expected. Eventually the robot wakes up and then they find out, Marvel's enemy or rival, Jan Rog, has sent the robot to come kill him because, you know, as you would expect between, you know, two dueling superheroes, a classic trope is that the squabble doesn't exist just because they're both powerful beings, but also there's a woman involved. And so,
of course.
Yeah. And of course, a reminder, Jan Rog is Jude Law's character in the film.
Yes.
So Jan Rog is like, oh, you know, I hate Mar-Vell. I'm going to kill him. Let me send the sentry down to Earth where he is at this moment and try to kill him. And it goes sideways. This whole thing kind of leaves Carol at a dead end in her career, at least when it comes to security. And she's not as enthused. She's not as good at her job. And she's like, you know what? I'm going to leave that behind. I'm going to become a writer, become a journalist, because I'm good at that. I don't know how that correlates. It was so left field when I was revisiting these issues. I was like, that seems strange. I'm a chief of security for Cape Kennedy, but you know what? I'm going to go into
back to journalism.
It's so bizarre.
Hey, if it's a hobby, it's a hobby.
Yeah, it's very true. And so that said, it isn't until Ms. Marvel #2 that was released in February 1977 that you actually get to see her become Ms. Marvel. And so she inevitably gets her own title. It's called Ms. Marvel. The entire issue goes through the course of this superhero, and it even introduces J. Jonah Jameson. Mary Jane is there. Peter Parker is there. And this is all because Carol Danvers is a journalist. But they have to, this new superhero has been running around, flying around. Nobody knows who her identity is. But she's known as Ms. Marvel, and she,
of course,
kicks butts and takes names. You know, like she's, who could it be? And they're never in the same room. Carol and Ms. Marvel are never in the same room.
Superman, Clark Kent thing going on.
100%. But even Carol herself seems to not know. She has no idea. She's like, oh, I'd love to get a story on the superhero. And J. Jonah Jameson offers her a job. He's like, well, you can't work for the Bugle. I'm going to put a new magazine out. It's called Woman. And you're going to be the chief editor. Sexism.
Woman.
Yeah, I was like, okay, this is the 60s. And so Carol's left to write for Woman magazine.
Okay.
At the Bugle. And so Mary Jane is there because I feel like they needed a sort of like another female character to help like push her a bit.
Okay.
And so she's there always visiting Peter, but for some reason Peter's always busy. Can't imagine why. It's how she and Carol become really good friends. And so like I said, you know, it's not until the second issue of this book that they actually show you unravel the origin story for the character. And so what happens is that when Mar-Vell is attempting to get away from Jan Rog and they're having a battle, blah, 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 there's this Kree device. So the Kree, we've been introduced to the Kree a few times by now.
Yeah.
Ronan the Accuser is a Kree.
Yep.
If you've played the Guardians of the Galaxy game, that whole thing takes place 100% with Kree and on Hala, which is also introduced in the Captain Marvel movie. And so this device known as the Psyche Magnetron. Here we go again with these weird words.
They're just adding
putting
words
together. Yeah. And so this Magnetron device explodes, and it's got like a certain Kree radiation property inside of it. And so when it explodes, Mar-Vell is attempting to shield Carol from the impact, but it does no good. It's pure energy. And so it not only further irradiates him, but for some reason, the power going through him and into Carol essentially mutates her DNA. So it's at that point that Carol becomes Kree-human hybrid. And so she's irradiated by this device, and then she is empowered with this new cosmic energy. But like I said, she doesn't realize that it's her. So she'll have these leading up to the second issue. She just constantly has these blackouts. She's like, I'm faint. And like they draw
And then
her.
she goes and saves the world?
And
type
then
of
she
stuff?
just like, I don't have a screenshot of it here, but she'll legitimately, like there's a point where a colleague of her, a human colleague of Carol's comes in and is like, oh, I heard you weren't feeling great. You know, are you good? And she's like, oh, I'm fine. And then she starts having a spell and she literally faints in his arms. And he's like, Carol, are you okay? And then she transforms into Ms. Marvel in front of his eyes. Like her hair's a little shorter and she's donning a different suit. And then she just walks away and jumps out the window and flies off and like has no.
Oh, so it's like two different personalities
people.
for her, or people for her, yeah.
Yeah, and so she doesn't come to realize that she's both until a bit later, which is kind of interesting.
It's
So
like a whole Moon Knight situation.
yeah, almost right. Like she's got another personality in there, and so yeah, it's a very interesting take and origin for that character, especially knowing how she is now. Because in the comics now, she is definitely that person on screen. She's very much that character, which I think, even though the character itself is not one of my favorites, and that film isn't one of my favorites, I will hands down defend Brie Larson because she nails it.
She nails
it. Yeah, she's totally 100% got this character down. And so, so the Captain Marvel that we do know actually doesn't appear until much, much, much later, and that's in Avenging Spider-Man #9. July 2012.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a good 60 years.
Yeah.
And so she had gone through these iterations. We'll talk about it a little later when we get to the aesthetics and costumes. But yeah, it wasn't, and they kind of dropped it cold on us too.
Oh, really?
Let me show you. So this is the cover of Ms. Marvel #1. And this suit is not what you're used to.
Oh my gosh.
But you'll see, I love that's your immediate response. And Jeff's face.
It just doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't. It's the wildest part is that in one of the panels, oh my gosh, read this, okay? So this, I forgot what the guy's name is, but he's basically telling his colleagues, which by the way are AIM soldier
AIM
dudes,
or
the AIM
dudes.
dudes, the guys that look like the beekeepers from WandaVision are in here.
Yeah.
And so he's our, the main guy is like, oh, this is Captain Marvel, blah, blah, blah. And then the AIM guy says, Jeff, I want you to read this.
In any event, we do want her alive so she can explain the design of this costume she wears. Yeah. It logistically doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Outwardly, it appears purely ornamentational.
Yeah. And so
It just doesn't make any sense.
So even in the comic, they're like, okay, so she's got a midriff.
Yeah.
Her legs are exposed. This doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense for any hero.
Right. And then they played it off and they were like, oh, but we did a X-ray and we see that it's made of electromagnetic fields and blah, blah, blah. But it historically for female characters, it's just really sad. It's bleak.
Yeah.
It's bleak. And so they, again, we didn't get the Captain Marvel that we know now or most are familiar with until 2012. And so this issue came back and so it came out. And, Spider-Man is one of those characters where they will release all these, adjective verbs in front of his name. And so he's been the Amazing Spider-Man, sensational, radioactive, what not have you. And in this one, he happened to be Avenging Spider-Man. And so it was primarily and at large drawn by Terry Dodson, who used to be one of my favorites. And so they just dropped cold turkey, like, boom, here is Captain Marvel in a new suit.
There we go.
Yeah. And much not nearly as ornamental, definitely more functional and more, she's covered head to toe. Again, it looks just like the one in the movies. So you don't really need a reference, but that was it. And so from then on there, the last 10 years, she's been that Captain Marvel.
Love it.
Love it. And so before we get into the film discussion, just a reminder that Captain Marvel And we've talked about the DC versus the Marvel stuff a bit, where they have complementary characters. But Captain Marvel is also quite literally the pseudonym of Shazam. So Shazam's real name is Captain Marvel.
Oh my gosh.
But they don't use it for obvious reasons. And so back in the day, one of the cross, they used to be more friendly about crossovers, and they used to go willy-nilly and have Batman versus Spider-Man and stuff like that. And so they used to have callbacks to one another when it came to Ms. Marvel, Captain Marvel, and Shazam. Definitely never going to see that again, but it was fun while it happened. So, if you go back a few decades and look back to those issues, you'll see Marvel and Captain Marvel poking fun a little bit at Billy Batson and all them. But when it comes to Carol Danvers in the MCU, portrayed by Brie Larson, and as a young girl by McKenna Grace and London Fuller, we first saw her in 2019's Captain Marvel, directed by Anna Boden and Ryan Fleck, with music from Pinar Toprak. And so it's worth noting that this was the first Marvel fanfare that they actually changed, because it was just after Stan Lee had passed away. So that was the one that I think the only one they've ever changed after that is the one for Chadwick Boseman.
That's right.
The rest, they've just kind of added the characters as they go along. But
yes,
this Captain Marvel featured the first one with like straight up 100% Stan Lee, which was really cool. So I hadn't seen the film since it first came out.
Oh, wow, really?
Until a
Disney
couple
Plus?
days ago. Yeah. Yeah. And so we last saw the character in 2022's Ms. Marvel. Yeah, so let's talk about MCU Carol for a bit.
Let's do it.
So were you super stoked when she got the role? Were you like,
yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I think that was also a point. Yeah, I was just like super obsessed with the MCU. Still am.
Did you see Room with because she won or was nominated for? She won, right?
Yeah, I think she won or nominated.
Yeah.
I think I have.
I don't think I've seen
way
it.
back,
Yeah.
or maybe I haven't, and I just think so because maybe it's always playing on like cable television, and
Yeah.
maybe I switch it on for
I've
a bit.
heard she's exceptional.
Yes,
in it.
I heard
Really.
it. I heard she is too. I've always thought she's a great actor. Like I think of Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. I'm like, yeah, she's great.
It is genuinely one of the best comic book adaptations, or just like fun films.
Yeah.
I think it's very underrated.
Doesn't she play Joseph Gordon-Levitt's sister in that movie he did with
Zooey
with Scarlett
Deschanel?
Johansson?
Oh, with Scarlett. Oh, what is that called?
Yeah,
I haven't seen that movie. I've only seen clips
it's
from
it's like
it.
the first one that he's like written and directed.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen some interesting clips from that film.
I think she's in that movie. Oh, Don John, yes.
Don John, yeah.
Yeah, I think she plays she plays Joseph Gordon-Levitt's sister.
Oh, how funny.
So I remember seeing that.
She's great.
Yeah. But yeah, I like Brie Larson, and obviously when I saw the movie, this was coming from me who doesn't really know how she is in the comics, at least her character. Like,
Yeah.
no clue, but I know that she has, the red and blue, the star, all that,
Yeah.
all that spiel.
Yeah, because I remember like a gigantic talking point, and it was also because the film dropped at that particular year too. I feel like there was this turn in pop culture where, yeah, it was a thing where men would be like, "Oh, you should smile more."
Yes.
Like I've heard this as recent as last year.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm not smiling because it's not for you.
Yeah.
And so when that became a talking point, when it came to Captain Marvel and how, oh, she's not smiling in any of the movie posters, it's like, okay, well, Captain America isn't either. And
Yeah.
so to actually have a character like this, it wasn't like a woke thing. That's how the character is.
Yeah.
She's not around to please anybody.
I remember when I saw the movie, I seen it, and I think I remember texting you, and I was like, have you seen it yet? And you were like, yes. And I was like, is Brie playing the character? Like, is this how Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers is supposed to be, like her demeanor?
Yeah.
And you were like, 100%.
Yeah.
She nailed it. And I was
She
like,
nailed it.
cool. Then yeah. It's a good book. It's a good movie.
It's a good movie. Yeah. And so, not to overlook the fact that the story was co-written by Nicole Perlman. whose other notable work in the MCU is none other than Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1. So a lot of the galactical elements, like even the portals, are all the same. They're consistent with Guardians because Nicole Perlman is to thank for that. And so, but yeah, when it comes to Carol, again, I think they did a very good job in muting her, at least especially for this version of the character, because I guess it's their version and their resolve too. The 60s version, who was, like I said, she was fainting every 5 seconds. Like, how do you translate something like that and cut out the probability of her having to faint to become Captain Marvel or Ms. Marvel, right? Like, how do you get past that and make a better dialogue, a stronger dialogue of who this superhero is and how she came to be and why things recur for her in a certain way. And so I think they did a very good job of retelling the story in a way that made sense not only for the MCU, but also as a modern story.
Yes.
Not so much a 1960s
Sure.
trope, you know? And so quick recap, the year is 1995 when the movie takes place, and we're almost immediately introduced to Vers. Vez. I know, it's funny because, like,
can you read me, Vez?
The way that Jude Law says it is different from how everybody else says it. And I swear to you, like, watching the film, I was like, how would I would say Vers, right? But they didn't want to hit Vers because it's like DANVERS, right? And he's like, Vez.
Suit up, Vez. Fight me.
Yeah, and so Vers is a member of Star Force. And of course, there's Skrulls, as Skrulls would be in such a galactic film. And yeah, we'll talk about them in a bit too. But timeline-wise, because I know how important timeline is to many people. So Vers, or Carol, died in the plane crash in 1989.
Yeah.
And then came back as Captain Marvel in 1995. And then that's where the movie takes place, which is kind of wild to think about because I think people forget sometimes. Like, sure, it's 90s, right? But then you're like, it's 2025 in the MCU now. And so you think Carol has been, that was 30 years ago.
Yeah. My gosh.
And then you backtrack even more. She died 6 years before that. So it's 36. How old was she when she died? Say 30. So Carol Danvers is supposed to be in her 60s, 70s.
She old as hell.
She old in the inside.
But the Tesseract keeps her young.
Exactly. You nailed it. You nailed it. The cosmic energy is what keeps her young. So yeah. It's interesting when, again, when the movie opens and you're almost immediately thrown in. And I tell you, I don't know why when I saw it, when it first came out, I saw it back to back. I saw it first because I got an invite for an early screening. And then I saw it again for opening day.
Yeah.
And I didn't love it. Like, I thought it was fun, but I didn't love it. And I don't know what it was. And I've said this before, that I almost felt like it was two different stories being forced together because there were two directors. But watching it again in retrospect was so much better.
Nice.
And I don't know why. Like, I don't know why. It's not like they changed anything.
Yeah.
But for some reason in my brain, it just clicks a lot better than it did back in the day. I don't know. Maybe my brain was like trying to force, like, I was like, oh, you've put me in a certain time frame. Now I have to go back in the 90s.
Sure.
Like, maybe that's why, but
maybe.
I don't know. But it did resonate a lot better. Like, I guess the easiest comparison would be that Black Widow, for me, it was easy to go back and then Back to the Future.
That's fair. Yeah.
Whereas Captain Marvel, I found it was so hard, but maybe
it was like jarring because of the time.
Maybe
the time period of it. But
yeah. So that the film, so it takes place on Hala, which we're almost thrown into like in the first minute, less than a minute, and it's interesting in retrospect, especially because of playing the Guardians of the Galaxy game, where a large part of it does take place on Hala and involves the Kree. And so I think that's another thing, like having been with this other outer realm of characters that they still haven't really gone that deep into. and being introduced to the Kree further and being like, oh, Ronin's in this film.
Yes, maybe that's what that threw people off too.
Yeah.
Because Ronin died.
Yeah, and so there's all these elements that you're like slowly threading together. Like, okay, I'm familiar with that. I'm familiar with that, and so, and then to only propel further into the future and the present, really. Yeah. With Infinity War, Endgame, and Ms. Marvel. But yeah, again, we're going to talk about a lot of this, so I hope you can hang with me here, buddy. But we do have a pop quiz for you.
Great! I can't wait to fail.
I believe in you. So I mentioned earlier that Carol, she's gone through a lot of names, a ton of names. In the comics, this is in the comics. Of the following, which was not one of Carol's code names? Was it Warbird, Ms. Marvel, kind of give that one away.
No.
Rogue, or Binary?
So which one was not?
Was not.
Warbird, yep. Ms. Marvel, Rogue, and Binary.
Yeah.
Such vague, like, just random words.
I promise they make sense eventually.
Oh. Rogue, Binary, Warbird.
Yeah.
I'm leaning towards either Rogue or Binary.
Okay.
So I'm gonna go with Binary.
Was not.
Was not.
Jeff? That's incorrect.
Oh my god. It's Warbird, isn't it?
I thought it was too easy. Rogue.
Oh.
Yeah, Rogue was actually not one of her original code names. Yeah, no, believe it or not, Warbird, Carol has gone by Warbird, Ms. Marvel.
Maybe I got into my head a little too much.
A little bit. That's kind of ironic considering the story that you'll find out between Rogue and Carol. So again, going back, so her first appearance as Ms. Marvel was Ms. Marvel #1, January 1977. Her first appearance as Binary was in the Uncanny X-Men #164 in December 1982. And then she made her debut as Warbird in The Avengers #4 in May 1998. So basically, she has a new pseudonym and code name with almost every decade. But she jumps from Ms. Marvel to Captain Marvel, etc., etc., etc. Maturing with the character as we know it. And so from there, we're going to jump into powers and paraphernalia. What you see is what you get with Carol, let me tell you. So she was a normal human being before she got struck with the cosmic energy. And so once she was irradiated, she gained flight, enhanced physiology, which includes superhuman strength, durability, stamina, agility, and reflexes. Then on top of that, she's got the healing, energy absorption, and manipulation, including photon blasts, a binary form, energy duplication, and self-sustenance. So she's basically immortal, and she's basically, I don't even know what the word would be for that. Like she's omnipotent.
Unstoppable,
truly. And of course, as we come to know, Carol is powered by the Tesseract, or better yet, the Space Stone in the MCU. And they make note. She's got all that. She's pretty much got all the stuff in the comic books.
Yeah.
They did mention the photon blast quite a bit. I think Kamala even says it. Oh, she says it in the Disney Wish thing. She's like, "Did you see Captain Marvel?" And Sam, she talks to Sam in the Disney Wish short.
Oh, okay, yeah.
She's like, "Did she go binary?" And then Sam's like, "What?"
Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, and so even Kamala knows. And so go binary is Carol's ability to physically tap into the primal forces of a white hole, the very fabric of the universe. And so as such, her body manifested properties similar to those of stars, which is like the whole cosmic energy. She's got the Space Stone in her, etc., etc. On the binary costume, she's got 2 stars up here on her shoulder.
Yeah.
And so that's representational of the binary and the white hole theory.
Okay.
And so I wanted to go into that very quickly. I promise there's only so much science in this one. So what is a white hole? Are you familiar with this at all? Because black hole, everybody knows.
Yeah.
White hole?
Never heard of it.
So it's basically the inverted. So according to space.com, White holes are theoretical cosmic regions that function in the opposite way of black holes. So the black holes are like, they suck everything in, everything disappears.
Yeah.
And so the white hole is that just as nothing can escape a black hole, nothing can enter the white hole. So white holes were long thought to be a figment of general relativity born from the same equations of their collapsed star brethren, black holes. So it's almost like you can't put anything into it. It is what it is. And you can't take anything out, if that makes any sense.
Well, what's in there in the first place if nothing can enter?
Right. So it's like this pure cosmic energy where nothing can be added, but nothing can be depleted.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like a bouncer. You can't won't let anybody in.
We got club jokes in here.
Oh yeah,
yeah. So
been there.
So it's one of those things like that go binary. So when she goes binary, it's just like pure energy. Yeah. I don't know. It's wild. It's a big thought. Yeah. And so, of course, beyond that, Carol is a master pilot and combatant with scientific knowledge as well. And she's also a writer, as we mentioned.
That's right.
So I didn't realize this until I did my homework, but she's penned a best-selling book with her journalism experience.
Of course she has.
And she apparently did it in the MCU too. Well, actually, that one wasn't written. I think it might not have been written by her, but somebody did a deep dive in Ms. Marvel. And so when Kamala goes to AvengerCon, Carol's book or a book about Carol is on display in the convention. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's a deep dive. I was like, wow.
Did her and Ant-Man do a book together?
Yeah, I know, right? They're all writing books now. And she's also an experienced spy. And so by proxy, she's multilingual. So basically, she's perfect. So that's Carol, pretty much. And so I know it's very quick. And it's not, I mean, this is, you know what? This isn't really a pop quiz, but I'm going to ask anyway, because I feel like your knowledge is incredible. Now, in MCU movie release order, what number is Captain Marvel?
Oh, like where does it like stand on the timeline?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's technically number.
See, I knew you would have an inkling as to what this is.
I'm pretty sure it's technically number 2.
No, not chronological.
Oh.
Release.
Release?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, like number. Mm-hmm. Oh, like whether it's like 15, 16 or whatever.
Yeah.
Oh, God damn it. Why can't it be the other question? Because it's for sure number 2 in the timeline.
Yeah,
because
you're definitely right.
It's for sure after the first Avenger.
Yeah, 100%.
Oh my God. Okay. How many movies? See, now I have to do this.
You're going to go through it? I almost considered not asking because I knew you were going to have to go through the entire line, but I felt like you would get there.
I mean, I don't know the exact, like, I mean, I know like what movies when they were released, but the number of movies. Mm-hmm. I'm going to take a shot. We're starting from 2009, Iron Man coming out, and then about 2 movies per year, going up to like 1, 2, 3, 5. Because Captain Marvel came out in 2019.
Cool. Yeah.
I'm right?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Okay. So it's been 10 years pretty much since the start of the MCU. Mm-hmm. 2 movies per year. Oh, 2 movies per year because the only year we've gotten 3 movies was only recently after those during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. 22.
Is that your final answer?
Not when you do that reaction.
Is it your final answer?
Wait. I'm going to go with my go-to 24. 24.
You were closer the first time.
Oh, it's 20, huh?
It's 21. But you're so close. I'm really impressed. Because that whole hearing you say it and play it out, I was like, oh my gosh. 21. It's number 21 on the release list.
Man.
So you're so close. But still, the fact that you even got there.
Because I knew it. I knew. You know, what I did was I was like 10 years, 2 movies
That's
a year.
amazing.
So I was like, oh, that's 20.
I still give it to you.
But when Iron Man got released, that was
Sure.
the first movie of that year.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Well done, Jeff. I mean, that's astounding.
I try.
You tried very well. Oh my goodness. So we've already talked about it a little bit, but the aesthetic for Captain Marvel, it's changed with every name she's had. And so for you, Jeff, I've dropped an image into our little doc here. And so, yeah, you can see the progression of not only her power, but also the eras and the way that designers kind of took the approach when it came to a character like this.
Where was like the thought from number 4 to 6?
Yeah, and so that is the binary. That's Carol as binary, and so
Got it.
there are consistent colors of authority with the blue and the red and the yellow, and then she, again with the binary part, she then dips into a black and white state, and then gray, and then which is something that calls. That the Rambos have called back to.
Got it.
So Monica and Maria have both kind of gone into this, they took on I guess a black and white uniform. And so for Carol, I wrote it down here. So the first 3, so we're looking at this diagram of 12 Carols and 12 mostly different suits. And so Ms. Marvel 1 through 3, that's basically the traditional, if you will. They tried to make, again, it's a sexy version of a boy character. And so it just kind of, the first 2 are kind of dicey as far as that's concerned and questionable. The third one is definitely the most famous one, where, of course, Kamala adopts her Thunderbolt-like streak from. And then 4 through 6 are Carol as binary. She's got the power is basically bursting from the seams.
Yeah.
And so very quick background on that. So the alien known as the Brood, they look like giant cockroach aliens.
Whoa.
Yeah. They abducted Carol and experimented on her Kree genetics. And so the experimentation had an adverse effect on her, or unexpected, really, because she unlocked a whole new tier of power. And so she became so powerful that it literally started to just burst off of her. And so you kind of see that in the film, like when she near the end where she frees herself from the supreme intelligence. She's got all that cosmic energy and her hair turns into flames basically. And then of course number 7 is again Ms. Marvel. She's had longer hair. Number 8 is Warbird, and so it's just more tactical. It's when she joined S.H.I.E.L.D. for a brief period. And then of course that onward is all Captain Marvel. So the classic mohawk that you see even in the MCU, the short hair, the long hair, and then a very brief period where she had black and white. And where Carol worked as a U.S. Department of Homeland Security and played parole officer to the Thunderbolts.
Ooh.
Yeah, and that's the more tactical look for her. But yeah, she bounced back and forth between very colorful and not, but it's still very cool. And so it's giveaway time.
Ooh.
If you've made it this far, if you want to win our sensational prize pack, message us on Twitter or Instagram with the keyword Chewy.
Chewy.
Or Punch It Chewy. How about Punch It Chewy?
Punch it.
Punch It Chewy.
I can't do it.
Punch It Chewy on Instagram or Twitter, and you can win the prize pack. We'll give you till next Friday, so good luck. There, we will go into family, friends, and affiliations. So this is where it gets kind of funny and wild, because this will really bring together both like how the MCU and the comic book versions are very different and also meld together. Honorable mentions to her family in the comic books. She's got a huge family.
Oh, yeah.
So we're just going to skim right through these.
All right.
Joe Danvers Sr. is her father. He has passed away. Mari L. And they did this a lot. Mari L., who was her mother, deceased. Her siblings Joe Danvers Jr., paternal half-brother. Stevie Danvers, who was a paternal half-brother, also deceased. Laurie L., maternal half-sister. And so Carol was Cara L., I think. The Cree names
they're
are...
not even thinking hard enough.
There's a lot going on. It's like Ike Harris all over again.
Ike Harris.
So in the comics, Carol and her father had a contentious relationship from childhood onward, and they reflect that in the film. Like, her dad isn't in the film that much, but he was the one basically barking at her, like, get up, like, we told you not to go too fast, etc., etc. While her brother Stevie, who essentially introduced her into the service in the comics, was killed in action in Vietnam. So that timeline kind of puts her further back in the 50s to 70s, depending. So we do get a glimpse of her father and her brother in the films, portrayed by Kenneth Mitchell and Colin Ford, respectively. On the best friends side of things. So I realized after doing all these comparisons, I was like, oh, I didn't cover her best friends. But that would just get into a whole giant rabbit hole. So I didn't want to get too deep with as far as that's concerned, especially because she actually doesn't have friends in the MCU. So they would almost be pointless, right? Like, she only has one main friend. But it's worth mentioning that the ones in the books do include the likes of Peter Parker, who apparently she had a crush on at one time. I don't know, more or less.
That's hilarious, because not when you think about that interaction in Endgame.
Bizarre.
That's hilarious.
Hey there, Peter Parker. Jennifer Walters, She-Hulk.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, all the strong gals. As well as Jessica Jones. So,
oh my gosh,
all the tough chicks, man.
So crazy.
Yeah. So if you will, like, imagine the MCU versions being besties. But yeah, alas, the show must go on. So, speaking of Chewie, most people don't realize this, and so Chewie is actually Goose in the film. They renamed the character the kitty cat, if you will, because for obvious reasons. They didn't want Chewbacca, now that Disney owns both Star Wars and Marvel, they were like, people are going to be like, oh, that's stupid. They named it after the Chewbacca. When in actuality, they actually did, but before the merging even happened. You know what I mean? Yeah, so Chewie, the cat, is the Purrrckin, is originally from Earth 58163, better known as the House of M Earth.
Oh my gosh.
So the Purrrckin is from House of M.
Ooh.
And so when all that was going down, basically Chewie and Carol connected, and he came back to Earth 616 with Carol and was adopted by her. So he's definitely a dangerous Purrrckin in the comics, like you see in the MCU. He has the tentacles that come out of his mouth and everything. And he is played by animal actor Reggie the cat in the MCU.
Reggie.
Goose. And so our friend Stephen Ray Morris actually interviewed Reggie the cat on his podcast.
Iconic.
The Purrrcast. You can find the interview in our show notes. But yeah, Goose is indeed a reference to Top Gun, for those of you who don't know. And of course, Air Force, Carol, Top Gun, it all goes together.
Yeah.
Purrrckin basically have the power of deep space in their bodies. And so it's essentially this tentacle-wielding monster that can pull things in and nest stuff in their bodies like storage. Yeah. Storage. It's basically storage. So everything that the cat has consumed in the film is in its body in some way, somewhere, until it's not, for lack of more imaginative wording. But yeah. And so, fun fact, Brie is allergic to cats.
That's so funny.
So Goose is definitely CGI'd throughout most of their interactions. And I didn't realize that until I looked a little closer after knowing that she's allergic. And I was like, oh, you can see it's a CGI kitty cat. But yeah, that's some pretty fun stuff. And then there's Nick Fury. what can we say about Nick Fury? Like
The GOAT.
the GOAT. And so, Nick is obviously one of those characters that we could go into much more in depth in his own time. But in the comics, the two have been linked since their respective early days, placed in situations and missions involving Hydra, Sabretooth, Ben Grimm, even the rescue of Fury's colleague, Logan. So they've known each other for a very, very long time. They're not so deeply connected in the books, though, as many of our characters seem to be. We've gone through a lot of conversations where they really build these connections in the MCU, but then in the comics they don't really exist. So yeah, aside Shield and aside those interminglings of the Avengers and Hydra, it's not like they're best buds of all time like in the film. But they've been in similar situations and by proxy have grown closer over time. And so of course Nick Fury, portrayed by Sam Jackson, and then their relationship is very easily clearly represented in Captain Marvel film.
Yep.
Have we even seen them together since quote unquote the 90s? They haven't been in the same situation since then,
Endgame.
right? But they weren't in the room together.
Yeah, the death scene. The
were they both? Oh, they were. They were
the
both,
funeral.
but they didn't interact.
No, they didn't interact. We haven't seen them interact.
That's
since,
so weird.
Yeah.
Because he has the cutscene in Spider-Man, right?
He has a cutscene of him in space. She has the cutscene in Shang-Chi.
Yeah.
And that's
interesting. So they're in the same place at the same time, but no whatever. It's fine.
I mean, you can't have everything.
Yeah. I didn't think yeah, that's right. And Carol was very much like
she
the
was
odd
one of the
woman.
last ones.
Yeah.
Before Maria Hill. I don't know. No, she was on the steps, I think.
Yeah, she was on the steps.
with
Yeah.
Sam Jackson. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Interesting. Okay. Yeah.
he probably chopped it up a little bit.
Yeah.
You know?
I know. I think it's like Nick, Maria on one side, and then Carol's in the middle, and then I
Ross,
forget.
Thunderbolt.
Oh,
right,
yeah, Thunderbolt. Interesting.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay. Well,
I've seen that movie way too many times.
yeah, that's right. You've seen it like quite often, right? Almost every other week. And so another name that might be more familiar to listeners and readers alike, Monica Rambeau. And so in true Marvel form, Monica adopted a number of monikers over the years, including Photon, Daystar, and Spectre, but most recently known as Spectrum. And so her superhero origin is quite different than the one that we're now familiar with, including the relevance of her mother, Maria. But we'll get into that in another episode, really, because it's like a big deal. It's a big deal. She absolutely deserves her own episode. And so in the comics, Monica is powered with extra dimensional energy. Monica took the Captain Marvel helm when Carol decided to be binary. So it's like they just shift names.
They're
They're
just
like,
out here switching.
It's like Hawkeye.
They're tag teaming. They're just tag teaming.
Exactly. Hawkeye's like, I'm going to be Ronin. You can be Hawkeye now. And so Carol's like, I'm going to go be binary. And then she's like, you be Captain Marvel now. Yeah.
Like, okay.
Yeah, it's exactly right. And then, of course, these two have also formed a stronger camaraderie over time, especially in the modern books. And so, of course, just a quick flashback that, Monica in the MCU, she's portrayed by Akira Akbar as a young child, and then Tiona Paris in WandaVision. And so, yeah, the extra dimensional energy thing in the books is very interesting because, again, they've kind of taken this idea, and then they've crumpled it up a little bit, and then they've thrown it somewhere else, and then they're like, you know what, actually, let's try this again, and then they've made this extra dimensional energy instead a byproduct of Wanda's.
I'm gonna say it is extra dimensional.
It is technically, right? Like it's interesting. It's an interesting concept, and so again, we'll hopefully talk about Monica in her own episode. But another name that's very, very familiar is Maria Rambeau, and so this is a huge stark contrast. First and foremost, because in the books she was simply a seamstress.
Whoa.
Not an Air Force
Yeah.
person. No, none of that. She was just a seamstress. And her only actual connection to the Avengers, let alone the superpowered, was Monica.
Oh.
That's it. She had no
Connection.
connections
Yeah.
whatsoever. And so while the military background has been established since the release of Captain Marvel, so this is another case of them changing the comic book
For
Based
the
on
film.
the movie.
Maria and Carol still have zero connection in the source material.
wow.
Zero. So
That's
for
crazy.
So for context, for added context, Maria has about 10 actual comic book appearances since her creation, while Monica has 400.
Holy.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah. So so really the relationship that they then forged between Maria Rambeau and the MCU, portrayed amazingly by Lashana Lynch. I loved her in Captain, like she's my favorite character in Captain Marvel. It's so they really built that connection.
I agree. Yeah.
For that film.
Yeah.
Which makes total sense, I think, especially with the time leaps and all that good stuff. And then so that leads me to believe that in the Marvels film, like Monica and Carol will be the best friends that
I hope so.
Yeah.
Or it could go the total opposite way.
you
but
think
Oh, see, there's probably going to
Possibility.
be some friction.
Sure.
But
powers and
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. And so again, Lashana Lynch as Maria Rambeau, first and last seen in Captain Marvel, although we do see her variant in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness
oh, that's right.
as Captain Marvel
Yes.
from Earth 838. So that's really interesting. Yeah, and again, like I guess my not my beef. My beef saying my beef is not quite the right phrasing, but
your gripe.
my gripe with Captain Marvel is that I loved all the elements around Captain Marvel. I liked everything else, but not necessarily her story.
Sure.
I loved Nick Fury. I loved Coulson. I loved all the stuff that they were doing.
Yeah.
But I do appreciate her more now. I like her more now in retrospect.
Yeah.
But Maria Rambeau is a big part of why I like that movie.
Yes.
And so so I want to know your input as far as the timeline goes, because so WandaVision, she passed away somewhere with the blip
During the blip.
during
in
the
the 5
blip.
years.
So in
yeah.
the 5 years, she passed
So from
away.
2018 to 23, she passed away.
Right. Which is kind of wild. That was definitely one of the most heartbreaking, like,
That was pretty insane. That was a pretty intense cold open for one of the episodes for WandaVision.
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't even know why I saw it. Why did I even watch that? It might have been, I think I was watching the Assembled, maybe, for WandaVision
Yeah.
or something. God, what was I watching? But yeah, to then have WandaVision cover Monica coming back from the blip, and then her mom was already gone.
Yeah.
Bro.
It's like, she
was
was
like-
here just a second ago,
Yeah,
but
it's like-
she didn't get blipped. So,
She's like, honey, your mom passed away 5 years ago. Like,
or like 2, 3,
or-
whatever
yeah,
it was.
whatever
Yeah.
the timeline was. I was like, oh my goodness. Yeah, so I hope they embellish more, and I hope we get to see Lashana in the Marvels, even if it's just a little bit.
Little small flashback.
Yeah, something.
I mean, yeah.
Give her something.
I mean, that's Carol and Monica's connector point. Is
Exactly.
Their relationship with Maria.
Maria, yeah.
So.
Yeah. Then, there's this little character called Kamala Khan. And so very much, we've talked about Kamala for a wealthy amount of time in episode 35.
Yeah.
So very quickly, she idolizes the superpowered, but Captain Marvel is her number one. The two have had a bit of crossover, a lot in, she's shown a lot in Ms. Marvel, and they've had some interminglings in the bigger battles and like A-Force stuff, but yeah, they're not deeply rooted and connected together in the comics. Like there's no big picture like connection.
Yeah.
It's very surface like you see. And hopefully we'll see in the MCU, but of course Kamala Khan, Ms. Marvel, portrayed by Iman Vellani, first and last seen in the Ms. Marvel series. And yeah, as of the recording of this episode, the two haven't interacted on screen at the same time. However, they sort of cross paths at the end of Ms. Marvel.
Yeah. So we'll definitely get an explanation for that in Marvel's movie.
Yeah.
But very interesting. I'm very excited for it.
Yeah. I still find myself being like, what does it mean?
Yeah, like what kind of powers
What does it
she
mean?
have? What kind of powers does Captain Marvel have? Or what are they experimenting with something?
Like,
and
what
why
just
them
happened?
two? Why are they connected?
Right.
Yeah.
So many questions.
Oh yeah.
And so aside that, on top of all those friends and family, Carol has been on a few teams, most notably, of course, the Avengers. Have you heard of the Starjammers? By
No,
chance?
it sounds like an incredible rock band though.
Oh, actually, it's kind of funny. They had a fake poster made once upon a time, and it was like Starjammers performing live. But and I hope this comes to fruition one day, because the Starjammers basically includes a ragtag team of galactic rebels that might sound a little familiar, but their leader is Corsair, who is the father.
The air fryer?
How dare you, sir? Oh my God. He is the father of Scott Summers, a.k.a. Cyclops.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Jeez.
And my dream casting for Corsair is James Marsden.
Oh.
If he could ever come into the MCU, I would want him to play Corsair and then at least get, I don't know, some little cameo in a galactic film. Oh my gosh. That would make my life. But so Carol has been on that team, as well as the Ultimates, and even, of course, the Guardians of the Galaxy. Which would be amazing, but clearly it's not going to happen. So at least not the iteration that we are going to conclude with. Love interest, pretty interesting. Most of these don't even have MCU counterparts, so we're just going to try and blaze through these. But Michael Rossi. So while on duty, if you will, Carol was testing an experimental jet built by Tony Stark that went haywire, and she was captured in Uzbekistan. And while recovering from that escape, she met Colonel Rossi of the CIA. And over time, the two essentially became the perfect spy couple, which is really funny because, like, the flashbacks are just like screeching cars and like leaning out and like shooting guns and being like Mr. and Mrs. Smith, basically. That's basically what happened. And they just drifted apart over time. Yeah. And then she got powers and it changed the game. Yeah. I wanted to talk about this because I'm sure we will never see it. But Marcus, a.k.a. Scarlet Centurion.
That sounds bad. Ass.
It's just bad. Because I even wrote here in my thing, it's like, okay, this one is really effed up. So let's just try and hit this. Carol once learned she was 3 months pregnant.
Oh my gosh.
It was a Virgin Mary situation of sorts. It was unexplained. She was just pregnant one day. And so Carol left the Avengers, but not before revealing her identity. So up until that point, they just knew her as Ms. Marvel. And so she's like, guys, I'm Carol Danvers. Also, I'm pregnant. I need to leave. And so she just leaves. And so because of her DNA, because of her irradiation and all that stuff, the pregnancy was expedited, if you will. And so
scary.
Yes. And we've talked about this, weirdly enough, in a Gwen Stacy episode.
Okay.
And so Carol births the child. Yeah. Gives birth to the child. And he grows at an accelerated rate. And it's so alarming that he goes from being a literal infant baby into a grown man.
In the span of
maybe a week or two.
Oh my goodness. Ew.
Yes. Yes. And so the soon to be man, quote unquote, then claimed himself as Marcus, son of Immortus. And that's another alias for Nathaniel Richards.
Yeah.
Of Earth 6311, a.k.a. one of the Kangs that we meet in Quantumania. It's the one.
Interesting.
And he's one of the main ones that talks.
Yes.
So there's Rama Tut,
Immortus,
and then I forgot his name. And so Immortus is the one that's kind of got the tall headdress, and he's like blue and purple, I think.
Yeah.
That's his dad. He's saying that's my dad.
Wow.
So Carol gave birth to that baby. And Marcus chose Carol as he'd implanted himself so he put himself in her womb as means of escaping limbo. So he was in limbo. He's like, I got to get out of here. And he's like, I'm going to go into a woman. He came out as a baby and then grew and was like, I'm free.
Out of context, that would sound so like insane. I'm in limbo. Let me go inside this woman and plant myself in her
This is my
womb.
only way out. It's so bizarre. It's almost like Rosemary's Baby. It's almost like Rosemary's Baby, but it's so much worse for some reason. And so yeah. So
Yikes.
long story short, they fall in love.
We're moving on to the next one.
He brings her to limbo and it backfires because he's an idiot. And the time travel makes him accelerate and he turns into dust and dies because he's dead. So the time travel messed him up. This is why Nathaniel Richards is so smart because he avoids that issue. Doesn't have that problem. Marcus is a dum-dum.
What if we see that in the Mar? I'm just kidding.
Oh my, can you imagine? That's why I bring it up. Because it's so out there. Like who, why?
That's such like a
Why?
left field
Yeah.
type of thing.
It's so bizarre. And so, yeah, if you want to read some interesting issues in Carol's history, go for that one. But there is no MCU counterpart, thank God. None, not at all. Only Nathaniel. But you know who does have an MCU counterpart? Which this is a pairing most people will never see coming. Mm-hmm. James Rhodey Rhodes, a.k.a. War Machine. Don Cheadle and Brie Larson.
They've interacted too in Endgame and stuff. Just
tiny bit.
Just a little bit.
Just tiny bit.
That's
yeah.
funny.
And so, James Rhodes, well, let's just call him Jim.
Jim? What up?
They call him
Back
Jim
to
Rhodes.
you, Jim! From the depths of space. Back to you.
I know they call him Jim.
We are
some of the-
live from the world of Kree.
Yeah, they call him Jim in the comics sometimes. And I was like, no, he's Rhodey. He's Rhodey.
Nothing against the people who are named Jim.
Yeah.
Just sound
Jim.
Jim.
Yeah. So Rhodey was also a former U.S. Air Force pilot and Avenger.
Correct.
Carol began pursuing Rhodey as far back as 2014 in the Captain Marvel series. And then we mentioned this in one of our episodes. I can't remember which one. Maybe Vision. But when Rhodey died during Civil War II.
What?
In the comics. He dies in Civil War II. Carol and Tony got into it because it was Carol's boyfriend and Tony's best friend.
I remember we talked about this.
Yeah.
I remember this.
Yeah. And so Carol got so overwhelmed with the loss of Rhodey that she and Tony had fisticuffs and she left Stark in a coma.
And that's the premise of Civil War, right?
That's part of Civil War II, yeah. And then he died. And then it goes into this. Yeah, we didn't cover this in our Iron Man episode because it unravels into a whole
that sounds
like copy
sounds a lot.
clone thing. Yeah. You know how that goes. And so it's quite serious between the two. I think they rekindled somewhere in the later 2010s comics, maybe 16 or 17. But ever since then, nothing's manifested. Whereas in the MCU, James Rhodey Rhodes, portrayed by none other than Don Cheadle, well, primarily. Terrence Howard was the first, but we're Don Cheadle fans here. So, like Jeff said, these two have barely interacted in the MCU. They crossed paths a bit in Infinity War and Endgame, and then
the only line I can remember is he's like, "Hey, we're all about that superhero stuff too. By the way, where were you when I was?" There's a lot of other worlds that don't have you right now.
Yeah, that's right. She sassed him.
Yeah.
I told Jeff this the other day, but I was watching all the Assembled that I had not caught up with yet. And I kind of like doubled down on all the Marvel content and I hadn't watched yet. And so I rolled right into Empowered. And so something, a really great takeaway that they mentioned in the Captain Marvel Empowered episode is that the film doesn't have a love interest, which I think we need more of. They really focus on the fact that she has a very strong relationship with her best friend. Her best friend is the focus. The family that she has created and taken on is her focus. And she doesn't need a love interest. And I don't know that I could name many Marvel movies, let alone superhero films, that kind of follow that kind
so
of
you're
line.
saying it's nice that she doesn't have
100%.
Yes, I agree.
Because she's one of those characters, I think I said this about Gwen Stacy, at least Spider-Gwen version too. It's like when you start to add romance to the story, it dilutes the character itself.
Yeah.
And so I think Carol's one of those where it's kind of like you throw a romance into it and it's like, okay, look at Peter Parker. Look at the problems that Peter Parker has.
I mean, it's also a thing, especially if you have like a main character who's a woman, and you throw in a love interest who's a man, and it's kind of like, well, she's her own character. She doesn't need like a man to be someone who she needs to be. Yeah. Because then she's gonna get into a place of like she's nothing without X, Y, Z. Right. Whereas she can be just her own person. She doesn't need anyone else. She doesn't need a male love interest.
Yeah, and like Natasha, for instance. Like imagine the character building they could have had with Natasha if they never threw in love interests in her path, you know? And so I don't know. I don't know if they'll keep that for Carol moving forward. Like I'm actually kind of torn on it because I thought the same for Shang-Chi, and then at the end of the film, you kind of get the vibe that they're going to push the best friends together into a romantic relationship. Yeah, same, because I feel like they don't need to.
Not needed.
Like, why do you need to just have them be cute and best friends?
Best friends.
Why not?
Love that.
Yeah. Now, as for notable adversaries for this character, she's got a lot. So I very much decided to stick to the ones that we're familiar with in the MCU for the most part. First of which is, of course, Ronan the Accuser. And so this is more or less a no-brainer. They're related by Kree happenings. So Ronan has had his fair share of being a recurring adversary in the comic books. Whereas, of course, in the MCU, Ronan the Accuser, portrayed by Lee Pace, who came back from the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 film to be in Captain Marvel. But notably younger, and so we're introduced to a younger version of him, presumably 20 years, quote unquote, 20 years. Who knows how long that is in Kree, from the Guardians of the Galaxy version. But it is interesting, I think he had a poster. Did he have a poster for that film? Do you remember?
Ronan? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so.
For Captain Marvel.
I believe so.
Yeah, because I think I remember when it popped up, or a picture of him popped up, and I was like, what?
Yeah. And
they're introducing him so early, and he was pursuing the space stones, the Infinity Stones, as far back as 1995. Which is kind of wild. Yeah, and he still failed.
So now still lost.
Yeah, and
Loser!
He still lost. Big L. Whereas a more modern character, MODOK, he's truly one of those evil villain types in the books. It's kind of like Pinky in the Brain. It's like, what are we going to do tonight, Brain? He's like, we're going to take over the world. That's how MODOK is.
That's what I imagine when I see that. And I've seen some of the
100%.
And I've seen some of the animated stuff and how he's portrayed in the animated stuff, and it's like, he just,
and that's why
to kill everything.
Yeah, he's like, I want to be the insane killer. Like,
I'm going to take over the world.
That's how I see him. That's how I've always seen the character. Like, even in the Avengers game, he was like serious. But even then, he was not that serious. You know what I mean? And so when people were so like, oh, they like messed up MODOK and Quantumania, I'm like, but did they? Because he's still kind of funny. He does have tiny legs. Like,
there's nothing there's nothing unfunny about a man with tiny legs.
Funny. Yeah, he's like chill. Because in the books, especially in the Silver Age, like oh, he's so
Hey, MODOK died an Avenger. All right?
Darren. It's so funny. Yeah, so yeah, he crosses paths with Carol in the books.
That's hilarious.
And they've had some squabbles, but it's always over something like, I was trying to steal this jet and blah 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 and take
Basically,
over the city.
Just a typical bad guy trope.
100%. Yeah, it's a lot of
That's
that.
hilarious.
And so yeah, because of her suit, especially because it's like mechanical, it's got some mechanical depth to it, and she herself is so powerful. MODOK is like, I want that power, and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
So on and so forth. And so it's no surprise there. But of course, in the MCU, MODOK is portrayed by Corey Stoll, first seen in
Hilarious.
Ant-Man, last seen in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. There's definitely no crossover there. There's never going to be, at least with that version of the character. Who knows if there's a variant? I don't know. I don't think they will. I don't think it's needed. But it would be kind of funny. It'd be a little funny.
It would be a little.
But on a more serious topic, we've arrived at my favorite part of this. And so, among Carol's adversaries, this is, I think personally, aside one of the big bads, this is definitely high on her list. Mystique and the Brotherhood of the Evil Mutants, a.k.a. Rogue.
Oh.
So, again, we're not going to get too deep in the weeds with this one because Rogue deserves her own, Mystique deserves her own as well. But once upon a time, in the comics, Rogue and Carol went toe-to-toe because of the Brotherhood. And so Rogue was adopted by Mystique at a young age in the comics, and she raised her, all that good stuff. And so, of course, Mystique is not necessarily a good guy. She's a bad guy. Rogue kind of got grandfathered into that lifestyle before joining the X-Men. And so initially, Rogue is not the Rogue that many are familiar with. She is the one like in X-Men, the film, where all she could do was absorb the stuff. That's it. And so there was a very long time in the comics where she was like, well, I can do this and I can do that. I'm tough, but that's all she could do. So she would steal powers here and there. And so in an act of trying to prove herself to Mystique and the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, Rogue decided, I'm going to take on Ms. Marvel by myself. And so, of course, again, her mutant talent or curse is the power of absorption. And so once they got in a brawl, Carol attempted to escape. And so you have to remember, Carol has flight. She's invulnerable. She's got strength. She's got all this stuff.
Yeah.
And she thinks, I'm going to get away from this little girl. And all Rogue does is take off her gloves and she latches on to Carol as Carol's flying away. And so the longer she holds, as we know with Rogue, the more she takes out. And so
can she give back?
She has a couple of times in the books, but it's very super special circumstance. Even in the animated series version of this story, she gives it a little bit back, enough to get her back to life, I guess, but in the comics, she absorbed so much that Carol fell. She crashed into the water of the river, and Rogue adapted all of her powers so much that she drained her psyche. And that's why Rogue can fly, and that's why Rogue has super strength, because it's all from Carol Danvers.
Whoa.
So, as a result, Rogue went a very long time, we're talking 20 years at least, where she wasn't sure which memories were hers and which were Carol's.
Oh, interesting.
And so during that time, Carol was excommunicated as a superhero, basically.
Yeah.
She was out of the game.
Yeah.
So there's a big gap where there's no Carol Danvers because Rogue just took her out. She was in a coma. So that's a gigantic piece of that character's history.
Huge.
And so that's why I theorize with Marvels, that is a fantastic opportunity to start introducing us to X-Men in some form, even if it's just having Mystique in there or whoever. And of course, speaking of Mystique, previously portrayed by Rebecca Romijn and then Jennifer Lawrence in the Foxverse.
Yes.
And then Rogue, previously portrayed by Anna Paquin. I don't think any of those people are coming back. I'm open to complete recasting.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, 100%. So we'll see if any of that transpires. I think that would be if they're going to pull Carol out in any way, this is the way that makes most sense.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. Another point of interest is Carla Sofen in the comics, a.k.a. Moonstone. This is another character that if they get an MCU counterpart, they're going to have their own episode for sure. But for she and Carol, rivalries really began during the Dark Avengers run. And so real quick, this is when Norman Osborn decided to create his own version of the Avengers, but they're all bad guys. They're essentially a Thunderbolts kind of group. And Carla was given the title of Ms. Marvel. And so she even had the costume and everything. And then Carla is, she's powered by something called a Moonstone, which is a Kree item that grants the possessor immeasurable power. And so this immediately puts them against each other. So it's like a Shazam versus Black Adam scenario.
Oh, got it.
Easily said.
Okay.
That's basically what it is. And so the Moonstone itself originates from something called the Lifestone Tree, which ties into ancient Guardians of the Galaxy. So they were basically these protectors that were pulled together to protect this life force. We're not going to go there because it's gigantic, but maybe we'll have an opportunity to revisit it one day. But in the meanwhile, there is no confirmation on whether or not Carla appears in the Marvels, but that seems to be the big speculation that this is the movie that she makes her debut in. And to double down on that, the rumor is that Zoe Ashton, Tom Hiddleston's partner, is rumored to have been cast as Carla Sofen because she's in the movie.
Oh.
Yeah. I didn't realize it was the same person. I was like,
I guess we will see.
yeah. And also, how fun is that? We have like a legitimate couple in the MCU.
Oh.
that
Yes,
Tom Hiddleston.
that is true.
Yeah, and Zoe.
Very true.
Yeah, so, and I met them because they did a Broadway show with Charlie Cox.
That's right. Yes.
They were all together. So it's like...
Plotting.
I was like, somebody got an in. Somebody got an in between the two of them. They were like, hey, we know her, this fantastic actress.
Yeah.
So she could be Moonstone in the MCU. We don't know yet. So we'll find out very soon, I think. Another familiar name in the comics, Talos. So he is the Skrull that we meet in Captain Marvel. But I will say he's quite a bit different when it comes to comics. Whereas Talos in the MCU film, he's very much a traditional, like, sort of Skrull. He shapeshifts, he does all the things. In the comics, he does not have that ability. So he had kind of a Loki effect where he was born into this royal family of sorts when it came to the Skrulls, but he couldn't shapeshift. So they were immediately like, oh, he's a runt. But unlike Loki, his family kept him around and, he lives on.
Yeah.
He's here and there. And I believe in the comics, they actually become friends of some sort. So it's kind of interesting how that worked out. But another entity that we're not going to get into today, heck no, oh my gosh, the Skrulls. This would be a significant semi-deep dive. So that would sprawl into the Secret Invasion, the Kree Skrull War. And
it's going to come soon.
Yeah, we're going to talk about all that.
Coming soon.
So stay tuned for another episode for all of that. But, the Kree and the Skrull, they're weaving all these domains together in a slightly different way when it comes to the MCU. Which of course Talos and R. Keller. I laughed when I put this because I was like,
crazy.
I remember him as Keller, but his name is R. Keller, and I was like, R. Kelly? Ooh.
Yikesies!
Keller. So Talos and Keller are portrayed by Ben Mendelsohn in the MCU. First and last seen in Captain Marvel. God, every time I say Captain Marvel, I want to say Captain America very easily.
Was that the last time he was seen?
Was he in?
Is he in
the cut? Oh, so yeah, it's the Spider-Man Far From Home.
Far From Home, right?
Yeah, that would be the last one. And so yeah, in the MCU, he's a Skrull general who collaborated with Mar-Vell in order to save the Skrull refugees from the Kree Empire. There's a little overlap with that in the books, but I don't think it was Talos himself. I think it was another group of Skrulls that might have been in the comics, but. It's very similar. And of course, he undoubtedly plays a bigger part in the next phase. So he'll be returning with the release of Secret Invasion we'll see more of Talos and what happens to the Skrulls from that point on. And so we mentioned Supreme Intelligence at the top of the show. And so this is definitely one of the more notable adversaries when it comes to Carol in the books, but it's actually more of a Captain Marvel thing. So real quick, Supreme Intelligence in the books. It's so funny how people conceptualize, right? Like pulling the adaptation from the books and creating a real life version. Yeah. In the books, Supreme Intelligence is literally like a blob of a head. And it's giant and green, and it has these like tubes sticking out of its like for hair, and it's bizarre. But yeah, it's like thread like spindles that they then kind of adapted into the film. So you know, like when she goes to talk to the Supreme Intelligence,
yes, she's
wrapped in all that stuff.
Yes,
imagine that, but just on a floating head.
Oh my gosh.
That's the comic book version.
Oh.
Yeah. And so Supreme Intelligence itself was created over 1 million years ago by the Kree with the intention of creating a cosmic cube to combat their enemies. Imagine that. And so, of course, the Kree's mortal enemies are the Skrulls. So it was basically created to be a weapon.
How dare they?
And we briefly discussed in our Eternals episode how the Inhumans were part of this whole evolutionary reckoning that would put an end to the Kree race. And so in the comic books, the Supreme Intelligence had this premonition that someone by the name Midnight King would end its existence. And the Midnight King in the comics his true name is Blackagar Boltgon.
Wow.
a.k.a. Black Bolt.
Wow.
So that's how they all get into it. Another story for another day.
All these characters
they're all coming together.
They deserve to just cross over at some point.
I know. It's so wild. But I like seeing it from your perspective because I get to see you absorb the information as I'm telling it.
Yeah.
And I can see how you're legitimately connecting all the dots, and you're like, I know these names now. Like, you know the characters now. And so you're putting 100%. Them. It's so cool from my perspective. I think it's such a nerdy thing, but I think it's rad.
No, but it's like we have faces to some of these names. So it's like, okay, if they interact in the comics, like, what's stopping you from,
Exactly.
In the MCU.
And Maria Rambeau is a perfect example. Like, they barely have a connection in the comics, but they were able to create this really intricate storyline.
Like, it's pretty much Carol's, like,
world in the movie. And so for the even smallest chance that we might be able to see these sort of crossovers is interesting. So the Inhumans, we're waiting for the rest of them. We'll see if this ever transpires again. That poor show. Oh my God. But in the MCU, Supreme Intelligence, so we never get to see it in its quote unquote truest form.
Yes.
It just takes on the form of Wendy Lawson, Dr. Wendy Lawson, who is portrayed by Annette Bening, who was first and last seen in Captain Marvel. And so in her human form, Annette played Lawson, but was known to the Kree as Mar-Vell, which again is the gender swapped character from the comics. And so Supreme Intelligence seemed to emulate who Carol respected most in her life. And so it didn't have a bound appearance. It was just like almost like a shape-shifting whatever. It just pulled an image out of her brain. And so, of course, Mar-Vell is another rabbit hole in itself, a gender-swapped character that predates Carol about a year. I don't know that we will go into Mar-Vell because, I mean, they kind of laid it out in that film, too.
Yeah, like the whole backstory.
Yeah.
And like, her secret and everything. Yeah.
Sure.
I don't think they need to. It is they said what they were supposed to say.
Yeah, exactly. And the story is very much, the now, which is Carol. And we've covered enough about Mar-Vell in this episode. So, but yeah, so like very much like Talos and the Skrull mentioned just above. Yeah, Mar-Vell attempted to save the Skrulls with the power of the Tesseract. Backfired, and like the comics, Carol got irradiated and she absorbed the energy, and boom, you have yourself a Captain Marvel.
Yeah, true. Yep.
But of course, one of the bigger adversaries that Carol faces in the books and the comics and the movies, is Jan Rog, who we mentioned at the top of the show as well. He largely dealt with Mar-Vell in the comics. Like, again, there's more of a, not a 50-50 split, but maybe a 75-25. But he has his fair share of fallouts with Carol as Ms. Marvel. And yeah, again, he's almost the catalyst of creating Ms. Marvel, because it was his ambition to kill and destroy Mar-Vell that led to the explosion that led to Carol getting irradiated.
Yes.
So he played a part. And of course, portrayed by Jude Law in the MCU, which I kind of forget sometimes. I was like, we have Jude Law in the MCU.
He's in there.
That's so weird. First and last scene in Captain Marvel. I do not believe we will ever see him again.
I don't think so.
Yeah. Honorable mentions, of course, to Diamond Hanso as Korath. Yeah. I should have looked up the pronunciation of this person's name. I'm so sorry. But Algenis Perez Soto as Atlas, which is Atlas. Another one for you, Jeff. Rune Tempt as Bonchar, and one of Geoffrey's wifeys, Gemma Chan, as Minerva. And
That's hilarious.
The lot of them portrayed Star Force.
She's the first person to play two characters in the MCU, right?
This is the funny thing, because I'm not sure if this was before or after I'd seen Crazy Rich Asians, but I was like, I had to have been after. I was like, heck yeah, she's in the MCU. This is going to be awesome. She's going to be so good. Minerva is really cool. And then she barely got screen time.
Yeah.
She had like 4 lines.
Yeah.
And then they killed her.
Yeah.
I was upset.
Yeah.
I was like, the whole Asian representation on top of it too. And I was like, they just straight up killed the Asian.
Yeah.
So I was kind of mad.
And then they were like, well, I think she deserves way more than that.
100%.
So boom.
Cersei. Yeah, I know that could have played a part as to why I hated the movie at first, but I remember tweeting about, like, I was like, yo, you wasted Gemma Chan, like, wasted her, wasted that talent in such a terrible role. Not terrible, but a small role.
Just a super small
really
role.
A bit
minuscule,
bit part.
yeah.
It's a bit part, But yeah, I'm glad that they brought her back for Eternals, because she's worth so much more than what they gave her in Captain Marvel. But yeah, all those characters are sub-characters in the comics as well. I don't think we'll see them at all again in the MCU. They've done their part. And of course, Jan Rog himself is the reason why Carol, like the comics, got her power and became half Kree in the first place. Because in the MCU, he actually, I don't remember if he distinctly gave his blood, but he made sure she got a blood transfusion.
Yes.
That made her a hybrid to save her life, because she absorbed the power. Yeah, I don't remember if it was him or not. I can't remember, but yeah, so he still plays a huge part in the conception of the superhero. So thanks, Jan Rog. And then, of course, last but not least at all, Thanos.
Oh.
Though, yeah? Were you going to say something?
No, he's definitely an adversary.
Yeah. And so, funny enough, in the comics, similarly to Jan Rog, Thanos actually dealt with Carol's predecessors for a majority of his comic book history, and not really Carol directly until Civil War 2 again, because he also he also contributed to Rhodey dying, because it was this whole thing of like just this that scenario where had things been 1 second different, it would have changed everything.
Wow.
And so it was just as much of a curve of a bullet, like Rhodey launched up and, She-Hulk miscalculated or something. I forgot what happened. Then that led to Thanos actually impacting Rhodey. And then that's when he fell from the sky and he died. It's very similar to what happened to him in Civil War.
I know.
The film.
I was going to say.
When Vision took him out of the sky. Very similar.
Rhodey just be dying, man.
Yeah, dude.
Well, I mean, obviously he's
Rhodey
not dead in the
a
MCU,
break.
but he'd be taking a beating in the sky.
Taking a hit. Yeah, that's why I remember seeing that. I was like, is he gonna die? Because he didn't survive the fall.
I legit thought he was gonna die too, and I was like, oh shoot.
There has to be a version of that where he died. There has to be a version of that script, because
maybe in Armor Wars. Maybe they do fall in love. Maybe they do date.
That would be so wild. It would be wild.
Just Don Cheadle and just Brie Larson.
That'd be so crazy.
He's like, oh yeah, they do fall in love, and then boom, he dies.
And then he dies. I know, yeah. See, talking
And
about
now Carol's
romantic
on this
plot
kill
points.
mission. Like, I'm gonna kill whoever did this.
Exploding into binary form. Yeah, it's
and then
possible.
passes the Captain Marvel to boom to
Monica.
Monica.
Yeah,
There
see?
you go. Then you have the
See?
third Captain Marvel movie or the
Yeah,
Marvel
see?
movie.
You've revealed it.
We're just like writing the MCU right now.
We're putting it into the universe.
I wonder.
Right?
I mean, they'll probably never ever. But if like someone on Marvel like ever listens to this and they hear our like wild theories, and they're probably like, "Damn it, they figured it out."
Oh my gosh, can you imagine? And so yeah, of course, Thanos primarily portrayed by Josh Brolin in the MCU. First seen in The Avengers.
Go.
Last seen in Avengers Endgame. Or What If, depending
Yeah.
on which one you're following.
He dies in both. So.
Yeah, he does both. So, and then I just put I didn't put anything here under Thanos except for that punch.
I mean, that fight was pretty.
That was dope.
That was a sick
It
fight.
was dope, right?
And I love that Captain Marvel got because technically Captain Marvel is the only one that can kind of go punch for punch
100%.
with Thanos.
Yeah.
Like if you
Like-
think about it.
That shot of Carol
Yeah.
when it's the perspective of almost behind Thanos' shoulder
Yeah.
and she's got his hand.
Yeah.
And she just goes
And
like,
she can't.
jerks
And
forward.
then he can't. He's like, oh shoot, I
And he's
can't
like-
beat her. I was like, oh crap.
Yeah, and
then-
she does this move that she actually has, I believe she has in Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, where she can jump and dive punch.
Yeah.
And she does that to him in the movie. And I was like, I love Carol right now.
That was I thought that
I
was
really
really cool.
loved
I know
it,
people
yeah.
like probably like didn't like it because they're like, oh, Deus Ex Machina. Of course, Captain Marvel just comes out of nowhere,
Exactly,
to
right.
help save the day.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like, well, there was really no one else that could like.
No one else could have done that.
No one else could have saved the day
100%.
like that.
Because she's literally, again, irradiated by the cosmic cube,
Yeah.
which is the space stone.
Yeah.
You don't, I mean, if you think about all the stones, right? And what
There's
they're,
only two, I think, heroes that are powered by
Yeah.
by the stones. It's Wanda and
Carol.
And
Yeah.
Wanda was already
And they're both
And Wanda
one-
was about to beat Thanos too.
Yeah.
But you know.
you took everything from me.
But sir, our troops just do it.
Yeah, see?
Yeah.
Like if he didn't have his backup, she would have
Wanda
would have got
been
him.
dead already.
And the only reason why Thanos got Carol anyway was because he literally had to take the stone off.
Yeah. He needed the Power Stone
and then hit her.
To have enough force
Yeah.
to hit Carol like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Like it.
Like,
bruh.
come on, guys. Let's put together the details here.
Wait, are you left-handed?
I'm right-handed.
How can you? I wish I could snap with my left hand. I can't do that. We're Thanosing. See,
We're killing a million people right now.
Yeah, but yeah, no. I think people.
They're the only two people.
They're the only two
that can handle
Uh-huh.
Thanos one-on-one. I don't know if people realize that. I really don't.
No, they thought it was an easy way out. Oh, like it's like no, you're a misogynist. Let's
Yeah.
just call it what it is.
Like, I don't really
no,
think-
they
yeah.
are quite literally the only two powered enough to have done that.
Carol's the only person that can fly through the ship and destroy it like that.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
No one
yeah,
else
yeah.
would have been able to do.
Yeah.
Would have been able to do that.
She took out what I saw a statistic online. It was like she took out like 300 Kree soldiers or whatever soldiers and that ship in 17.5 seconds or something.
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's Captain
Danvers,
Marvel.
you could use your assistant.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. So she's a powerhouse. She's clearly a powerhouse. And sorry,
100%.
Thanos. And so yeah, that brings us to other versions and in other media. Really, like the only ones that we really need to talk about here are again the video games. So
Yeah.
Carol appears in multiple video games, including the recently released Midnight Suns. I still have not played it, but I saw a preview today because they just added Morbius to the character line. And I was like, I got fed that one. But she's in that game, as well as, again, Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, where she plays a lot like Cyclops, Psylocke, and Spider-Man put together, if you're familiar with that. And she's voiced by great Delisle Griffin in that game. But the most notable variant version of her, of Carol in the MCU, especially, is on the Disney Wish cruise, where they have this entire, I guess, dinner show, if you will, called Avengers Quantum Encounter. So this thing is apparently at least the screen time. So if you don't factor in the meal service and all that crap, it's about 22 minutes long. It's like a small featurette. And so it's something we've mentioned in a couple of episodes, actually. And so if you remember what Tony, the cast member that works at Avengers Campus, told me,
yes,
he let me in on the insider baseball that the cast members of the Disney properties have been equipped with this knowledge that Iron Man is alive at Avengers Campus and in these other various parts of mediums because they're part of the multiverse. So the Carol that we meet in this Avengers Quantum Encounters, another Carol, but it's the one we're familiar with as well. And so Carol interacts with the Wasp and Sam Cap, in this quantum encounter. And so I watched it. I sat down and watched the entire thing because I was like, I'm actually very interested in this. And so as it goes about, you're introduced to Ant-Man and Wasp, and they're telling you all about this new thing that they built in the lab, and et cetera, et cetera. And so I forgot who the adversaries are, but they came to steal the device, and of course our superheroes come in for the rescue, right?
Yeah.
And so Wasp drops in, she's kicking butts and taking names, and then Cap comes in and does the same, and then things get really dicey, and then here comes Captain Marvel, swoops in, saves the day, goes binary. She literally says to Sam, she's like, give me a second. And she takes out like 12 people.
That's right.
Oh, they're Ultron bots.
Yes.
They're Ultron bots.
I remember seeing that.
Yeah, and so she takes off, and then just as she takes off, Kamala arrives, and that's...
Like, did you
see Captain Marvel? And the funny thing about that whole thing is that it looks like they're all on a green screen stage together.
Yes.
But apparently it was all filmed individually.
Of course it
because they had to film them. Yeah, they had to film them in between films, their own projects.
Yeah,
so
that sounds about right.
Yeah, that's kind of wild. I'd love to see the behind the scenes of that. But yeah, so they would film Brie while she was between takes or films, whatever, on her own time, and then they filmed them all separately, brought them together with movie magic, and it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool, and so it's also pretty rad to see them all in one little thing together.
Hopefully they all get together soon.
Yeah. So, aside that, we haven't seen any of those characters, at least in that particular cluster, all together on a screen together, except for Endgame. But yeah, we'll see in the future, especially with the Marvels.
Yeah.
As for Carol, what do you think is the future of the character in the MCU?
Still think she plays a big part.
Sure.
Like 100%, because she's still one of the most powerful.
She's also one you can't just sunset. You can't just sunset at Captain Marvel.
She's just way too powerful. Like, she is the, if not the most powerful character right now. And
I feel like they've also given her a really good reason of when she's not there. And just like you said, there are other galaxies that don't have you guys.
Yeah.
Like,
and unfortunately, they
don't have you.
Yeah.
She's kind of like the keeper of the cosmos.
Exactly.
Boom. Trademark. Patent that. Pay me my money.
Geoffrey trying to make me spit take in the middle of recording. Keeper of the cosmos. I love that. That's really good.
So it's
real.
like her job is never done because there's only one of her.
Exactly.
Literally only one of her, and she's
unique.
So powerful. She's so empathetic. She's not like a power hungry, person.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, I see a great deal for her, especially after the Marvels comes out.
Yeah.
We'll see where she kind of weaves in, and then come Secret Invasion maybe, or come Secret Wars, Kang Dynasty. Yeah. Because
that's going to be wild.
That's like the culmination of everything that we're seeing right now. And it's going to be even bigger than what we've seen in Infinity War and Endgame.
Exactly.
So we shall see.
We shall see. And of course, the first chapter of this We Shall See drops November 10th with the arrival of The Marvels in theaters. So yeah. Almost was. This was an interesting one. So in the MCU, a number of people almost portrayed Captain Marvel, some of which were even surprising for me. But the list started with Natalie Dormer, well known for her role in Game of Thrones. I liked her a lot.
She was
as
also
Carol,
She was in the first Avenger too, right? Doesn't she play or am I thinking of another girl?
Oh, you know what? She did. She was the girl that
she plays the girl that kisses Cap.
Cap. Yeah, that's her. So she almost played Carol, as well as Rebecca Ferguson from Dune, and a number of other projects. I could see that too.
Yeah.
Katie Sackhoff. She's a sci-fi queen. She's in The Mandalorian.
Yes, I was like, isn't that
Bo-Katan? Yeah. And of course, fan favorite Emily Blunt.
Gosh, she's in the running for everything.
She really was,
Holy
though. She
crap.
honestly was for both Black Widow and Captain Marvel. So she was really the one that she was in the top running because she was rumored to have been up for the role over the years, as far back as 2011. But she never said yes. And then what happened with Black Widow? Like, she was filming another movie, so she couldn't do that
just
either.
Scheduling, basically.
Basically. And so so no. So the other secondary in the running was allegedly Yvonne Strahovski. Most people will know her from Handmaid's Tale. She's the wife of the main awful person. I don't know how else to say it. She's been in a number of other projects. She was in Tomorrow. What was that movie? Tomorrow World? What was it called?
Edge of Tomorrow? That's Emily Blunt, sorry.
The one with the one with Chris Pratt. She was in that film with him.
Got it.
She played, spoiler alert, his daughter.
Oh!
But of all the names, Yvonne was actually my number one. I remember that whole thing going down. She was my number one, but Brie Larson, again, like I said,
kills it.
She nailed it. She got it down to the sharp jawline. Love
her.
Love to see it. And so some suggested reading. And so, I guess I failed to mention, Captain Marvel isn't exactly a character I'm very, very familiar with, but I've read a few of her titles. And so I went digging and honestly, the best runs are the most famous ones. And so it would be amiss to not suggest, first and foremost, Kelly Sue DeConnick's runs of this character. And she is, by the way, while she's not like a co-creator, she's definitely one of the most prominent writers when it comes to Carol. Yeah. And she's the one that has the cameo in the film. So when Carol is in the subway and she's looking for Nick or the doppelganger, one of the scrolls. Yeah. She passes by this woman with almost electric magenta hair, walks by her. That's Kelly Sue DeConnick. And so she's iconic for that hair color. And so, her 2012 and 2014 editions of Captain Marvel, self-titled comic, volume 7 and 8, if you want to get granular with it, with Dexter Soy, as well as 2015's Captain Marvel and the Carol Corps with Kelly Thompson and David Lopez are definitely the ones to read. Then, of course, there's the classic issues, 68 through 75, 77, as well as A-Force, with G. Willow Wilson, who is also, one of the top writers for Ms. Marvel, with Marguerite Bennett on pencils and my friend Jorge Molina on colors. Loved A-Force. Oh, I really want to see that come full force as something
at some point.
Yeah, it's got to be something. Even if it's a short series or a film, I would love to see that. And last but not least, Kelly Thompson will officially be ending her historic run of Captain Marvel with a double-sized finale that comes out this June. So, woo! Yeah, if you want something really, really good, there's that coming out in June. Get it once it hits the shelves. And that's sad. That's the end of the show.
Oh my goodness. Carol DANVERS.
See? Exactly.
Vez.
Carol DANVERS.
You can't control your power, Vez.
Yeah, there's something about Jude Law, man. Forever. Oh my God. Him in Closer.
I think my favorite part of that movie was the ending fight scene. He's like, come on, Vez.
Yeah.
Like, no powers. just casual combat. And she's like, no. I was like, yes.
And he's down.
Thank you.
And he's I know. And I was like, what? And I was like, I appreciate that.
And I was like, thank
And when
God.
she said, she's
Finally.
like-
We don't need this hand-to-hand combat
Yeah.
stuff. You have powers.
Right? Like
Use them.
You expect to have this big blitz
Yeah.
of like CGI up the wazoo. And it's like, no. She takes him down with one hit and she's like, I have nothing to prove to you.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, yeah, actually.
Love it.
We're good.
Love
We're
it.
good. So thanks for listening, guys.
Woo.
Next episode. Okay. So this was hilarious because I actually wrote the original winner before, but we ended up putting up some polls and let the listeners decide. And it very swiftly changed the outcome. So it looks like our next episode will officially segue us into the X-Men. So join us in a couple of weeks. Geoffrey's telepathically sending you a message. Join us in a couple of weeks for our next character study on the mutate magnate himself, Professor Charles Xavier.
Charles.
Charles.
Yes. The GOAT.
We are Groot. Salute to Katie, Ashley, Andrea, Ed, Nats, Claire, Laura, the Arachnerd, Choco MG2112, Eve, Jenny, Ariel, Tyler, Joe Liz, Robin, Andrew, and Melanie.
Woo!
Follow us on social at STRKCNTRST. And if you like what you hear, review, rate, or subscribe.
Thank you guys for listening and hanging with us. We will catch you in the next one.
Gotcha.
Bye.
Bye.
Do you know what time it is?
Can't sleep.
There are tabs for that.
Yeah, but then I'd be sleeping. Want to fight?